Hey friend, thanks for listening. We're all about equipping you to pursue real friendships. You were not created to be alone because life is just better with real friends. Let's get started. Hey friend, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Okay, one more time. What is up, friends? Welcome back to the Hey Friend podcast.
Episode 6.
Ooh, we're cruising.
We're cruising.
We're
Actually, it's
cruising.
kind of wild that we're already 6 episodes in.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been fun. What are we talking about today, Ben?
Yeah, so this episode, we're going to talk about something that I'm guessing most people have experienced, the end of a friendship. How do you navigate the end of a friendship? So a couple qualifiers, right? You know, many people have experienced this. It might have looked like you just had a kind of a slow fade on a friendship. Or maybe you had a blow up with someone, serious disagreement, and they were like, man, this is over. Or maybe you were like, this is over. We're not talking to each other again. Whatever. There's a whole bunch of different ways that might play out. So we're not necessarily going to focus so much on the like how friendships end. We're going to talk more about how can you or we navigate the end of a friendship in a healthy way, regardless of the kind of context in which that ending takes place. One thing worth noting, though, that right there's so many different things that could happen that lead to an end of friendship. Like there could be conflict, disagreement. We'll kind of go over a list of here's some kind of common ways that happens. But in general, what we're going to be speaking to in this episode is we're going to assume that you are the one who's taken the hit in the relationship. So you're the person who was negatively impacted. And we're going to talk, assuming that we're going to say, here's how you can maybe navigate the end of that friendship, whether the other person is saying cutting you out of their life for some reason that's right or wrong, doesn't necessarily matter. We're going to assume that you're the one who's taken the hit and that you're struggling with how do I end this well? How do I move forward with the end of a good friendship? So that's kind of what we're talking about. That's a little bit of the setup. Lucas, let's start out with this way. Let's talk a little bit about what's a time where you've ended a friendship or you've experienced the end of a friendship.
Ooh, for me is before I got serious on following the Lord, I had to end some friendships in my life that weren't pursuing me towards the Lord. So, and it wasn't nothing bad. It ended because the things that I used to enjoy, I don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And the things that, that whether it was the bars, whether it was going out drinking, whether going out every weekend, I don't enjoy that anymore, right? And we're not, and for me is I'm called to do something different now. So, and we're still friends, but we're not hanging out all the time, So
it was not necessarily anything big happened. You were just saying, hey, I'm not in the same lifestyle as you guys, so we're not going to be hanging out as much.
Yeah, it brought no life to me going out every weekend. It brought nothing to my life. It's the only thing that's brought me was pain, So it's like, I don't want to do this, or I would feel like poop the next day. I was like, you know what? This is not for me anymore.
not worth the cost. Yeah.
How about for you?
Man, there's several different things. I think of there's been a couple instances. A couple friendships that I had where those friends moved out of town, and just as a result of them parting ways, we no longer saw each other. Kind of similar to your scenario, but less intentional. This is like thinking high school. Their parents moved, so they moved, and we didn't stay in touch. And that ended. And there was definitely a couple of those instances that were sad, where I was like, these are people that I really enjoy spending time with, and then they're gone. I can also think of a couple friendships that ended. There was one instance specifically. This was more where I was in the wrong. In my early teens, I had a couple close friends that I hung out with a lot. There's the three of us, and was hanging out at their house and stole some money that was sitting on the counter. Just snagged it, put it in my pocket. Turns out that was their dad's money. Obviously, this is like, I'd say similar to you when I got real serious about walking with Jesus. Though I was a Christian at that point. And they obviously noticed it missing, and I confessed, gave the money back, and they were basically, the parents were like, we're not going to let you hang with our kid anymore. And I ended up, it was probably a month or so later, like called the dad and was like, hey, can we get together? I want to, talk with you about that and just apologize formally for that. Which looking back, I'm like, man, I was probably 15, 16 at the time. I was like, that was a bold thing to do as a 15, 16-year-old. And they were basically like, thanks, but no thanks. No, we don't want you hanging out with our kid anymore. So that was a hard ending for me because those were probably my two best friends, and both their parents were like, nope, you can't hang out with our kids anymore. Because
so
of one thing.
Both of those best friends, they had, I mean,
they were probably closer with each other
than
I was with any of them.
Okay.
And then their parents were close friends too. So both of their parents, they shared that information. We're like, nope. So that was a fairly painful ending because I was kind of left without any close friends for a good chunk of time after that.
15. What grade would you be in?
I have no idea.
13 year.
Actually, I must have been 16 because I drove to meet with Cody's parents.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, and there's like we said earlier, there's so many different scenarios through which a friendship might end. Let's do this. I think this might be helpful. Like as I was thinking through how do we talk about this, let's put just kind of three major categories into reasons why friendship end. One, I talked about, and you talked about this as well, scenarios that are just like separation, change. Like you said, I changed my priorities. Wanted to commit my life to Jesus, was cutting out this style of living. Therefore, those friendships faded. I talked about some friends who moved out of town. So that'd be like one category of the ending of a friendship. Something changes or physical separation happens. And it might look like I've had other friendships that have kind of faded. We got married. My wife and I got married. We had kids. We had some friends who were single or friends who didn't have kids. They have a different schedule. We see each other a lot less as a result of that. And that's just the reality of life. Doesn't necessarily make it easy, but it happens. And then we got two other categories.
Yep. We got conflict and disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is just hurt. And so, someone broke their trust, so, from a conflict perspective, and, it's okay to have conflict. Conflict, it's not always bad. Iron sharpens iron. So that's,
and I would even say, like, if you have a long-term friendship that has not had any conflict, that's probably
someone's
a sign,
hiding something.
Yeah. It's probably a sign that you're not really knowing each other fully.
Yeah. And there's this other side of conflict of hurt,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, man, that person's not forgiving anymore. That person is not humble anymore. That person is not meek anymore. Nothing is ever their fault. It's all your fault. And also there's that other conflict of just like, man, they attack your character instead of really the problem that's happening. And last but not least, I would say it's all about winning the argument.
Yeah.
It's all about winning the argument.
Easy for it to go that way.
It's so easy to go that way. And it's not a selfish act too. It's all about selfishness, So it's like, friends that just, you don't have to, friends are like-minded, not in a way like, oh, you both like the same sports team, drive the same car, or like the same how, not that type of like-minded. I'm talking about like-minded. Hey, we are both pursuing Jesus, that like-minded.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful for me, I think, to distinguish between, okay, we've had conflict, we've had disagreement about something versus I'm offended by or I'm hurt by something you did. Because the way you're going to work to resolve those things may be similar, but there's going to be difference. Like if I lose trust is a little bit different than if we disagree about, our favorite sports team or how we're going to spend our Friday night or whatever. So those three big categories, I think just helpful to have those in mind as you think about friendship ending. Is it ending because of separation and change? Is it ending because of conflict or disagreement, or is it ending because there was hurt or offense there? And this episode, we're not gonna talk so much about like how do you navigate some of those categories. Like I think in the future we need to do an episode on how do you handle conflict. Well, how do you do that in a way that doesn't lead to hurt, or how do you respond when a friend hurts you deeply? So, like I said at the outset of this one, I think we're going to focus more on how do you personally navigate emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, even the ending of a friendship. Um,
And
yeah.
and it's hard though. I mean, this
Yeah,
topic that
for
we're talking
sure. For
about,
sure.
it's hard. I mean, that happened to you a long time ago,
Hmm.
and I'm not calling you old at all, but still, like you
Yeah. I
remember,
mean, that was 18 years ago, 19
yeah,
years ago.
but you still remember those things. You know,
Yeah,
and, like it's not
for sure.
an easy thing to go through. So we also want to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point to make that. Like, man, the ending of a friendship, there's times where it's not too painful. Like
Yeah,
think of I can think of friends where I was relatively close to them. They moved. Sad to see them go, but it didn't impact me deeply.
yep,
But there's also been endings of friendships where you really feel the pain, and I know there's a lot of people who have experienced that.
yeah.
Whether the ending was because of something that was wrong or because of just the reality of life, that doesn't. Either way, it's painful to
Yeah.
lose someone who you consider a close friend.
Absolutely. Well, let's go. Let's navigate. How to kind of
Yeah.
navigate this
How do you
issue.
navigate
Really.
that? So
Yeah.
here's what we did as we were thinking through this, broke this down into 6 steps that you can think about. And I'll just kind of list the steps and then we'll take some time to dig into each one of these. Step 1 is really you need to honestly evaluate your part in the ending of the friendship. Step 2, you need to forgive if there's any need to forgive, which is a huge one. Step 3, you need to take the time to acknowledge, like we were just talking about, the pain and the hurt that came through that and not just move on too quickly. Step number 3 is, or 4, sorry, go to Jesus. And step 5, invest more deeply in relationships. And then step 6 is really, hey, you realize the end of that friendship might not be permanent. There might be a chance for restoration down the road. So, first one, honestly evaluate your part. I think this is a big one, particularly if the ending was because of some disagreement or conflict. Right? If you're feeling hurt by the other person, or if they broke your trust or whatever, it's easy to say, this is all on them. They're at fault. I'm angry at them. Whatever. But if we're going to be followers of Jesus, we need to take the time to honestly evaluate. Okay, what did I have? What did I do? What did I say that fed into this thing coming to an end?
And like even if it's 10% of what
Yeah,
happened,
even if it's 1%.
yeah, even half of 1%,
Yeah,
own it. Like own that thing.
yeah, because that's the only way you're going to learn through the
Yeah.
process. If you have shut your eyes to the fact that you had some part to play in the ending of that relationship, you're going to miss out on a lot of chance to learn, even if it's like we're saying a tiny little bit. One thought on this, I think it could be really helpful. Generally, friendships don't take place in isolation. Probably you have other mutual friends. It might be helpful for you to go to some of your other friends in a scenario, say where, let's say you had an argument with another friend, or they hurt you and broke your trust. So you're saying this relationship needs to be over. It might be helpful because you're probably not thinking perfectly clearly, and our perspective is not the ultimate perspective. Go to some of your other friends and say, "Hey, here's the scenario." Maybe hopefully they're already familiar with what's going on a little bit.
Yep.
If not, give them some input and invite their insight. Say, I know I probably had a part in this. What do you think I could have done differently, or what did I do to contribute to the ending of this friendship? And that's going to give you some major insight.
Do you think that can sometimes be an excuse for gossip?
Potentially, it could be. I think
Yeah.
here's the distinction, and this would be a good thing to talk about. Do a whole episode on the question of gossip. I think gossip is largely about intent. Like if I'm going to someone and sharing with them, hey, this happened here because I want them to give me some, response that makes me feel validated. I'm like, oh, this person said this thing about me, and I'm so angry about it. And you're like, the reason you're sharing that is because you want validation and empathy or whatever. That is what can tend to be gossip. I don't think it's going to be gossip if you're going saying, here's the scenario because I want you to tell me where I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the opposite of gossip.
Yeah. In Matthew, he talks about the way to approach conflict within the church,
Mhm.
right? It talks about go to that person first,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Go to that person. And if the situation is not figured out, invite someone else in, a third party in, basically.
Yep.
That could be a pastor, that could be a friend, that can be a family member, whoever's part of the church, the body.
Yeah.
And then if that doesn't happen, it sometimes even comes down to, hey, treat them like a pagan. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
For sure.
And when I read that, it's like, whoa,
It's intense stuff.
that is crazy. The next one we're going to talk about is forgive. Man, Jesus even said, if he forgave us and if we don't forgive, we're hypocrites.
Yeah.
We are hypocrites.
The Bible has some probably even more scary stuff to say about unforgiveness than it does to say about,
not forgiving someone. I've heard this said, it's like poison inside of you.
Yeah.
That's just growing and growing, and it's just killing you, right? Forgiving doesn't mean you have to forget what happened, but forgiving is just saying, man, I'm going to extend what he's extended to me, to you, So that's the next one.
Yeah, and there's freedom that comes with forgiveness, I think.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily instantaneous, but I think the value of if someone else has hurt you, whether that was intentional or not, the saying, I forgive them for that. And oftentimes it's helpful to even verbalize that.
And sometimes you can't wait till it takes a while to heal towards any type of hurt.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the first thing you just have to do is I forgive you, and I'm still super angry at you right now.
For sure.
But I'm going to choose to forgive you. And maybe tomorrow I have to choose to forgive you again, I have to continue to keep forgiving you. But that's just, really just, getting that peace and that freedom from that.
Yeah. And a point, to make there is that you forgiving someone else for hurting you is not dependent upon them asking for forgiveness. Now, they can't receive that forgiveness unless they, invite it, ask for it. But you can offer it.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't even necessarily need to be in the context of conversation with the other person.
And I think the right way to do it is just to offer it right away.
For sure.
Because he offered it to us without even, he went on the cross for us, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So number 4 here, acknowledge and process the pain or hurt. I'm thinking of the story I told earlier with my buddy Cody, and that obviously I was at fault there for stealing, but looking back on that, as a parent now, and my kids are young enough that this is not a huge issue, but I can project forward a little bit and think like, man, I would actually have, if one of my son's friends stole something, got caught, confessed, returned it, and then went above and beyond and called me as an adult who's 2 or 3 times his age, and was like, hey, can we get coffee? I just really want to apologize and ask for your forgiveness. I would probably have more respect for that kid than I did prior to them stealing stuff. Because I'm like, man, that's a gutsy move as a kid to go and put yourself in that awkward situation. So that was a hurtful thing for me to lose those friends. Obviously, my fault. But I think I kind of just moved on past that and said, well, whatever. I'm just going to go on to the next thing. Versus what I think would have been much more healthy would have been to actually sit down and think through, okay, how am I feeling about this? And what are my thoughts about this whole scenario, the end of these friendships that I've had for several years? And I think we tend to do that a lot in the modern world. Whenever we encounter pain, we tend to numb that. We tend to run away from it. We tend to say, okay, I'm going to just move on to the next thing.
I don't want to attack the guys here, but guys are really good at doing that. It's
for sure.
It happened. I'm going to just move on. But the Lord wants us to deal with things, right? The Lord wants us to, even that hurt and go. They can't go back in time, but you can acknowledge of okay, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And okay, moving forward, I am not going to approach this situation this way. And maybe that's all you need to acknowledge that hurt. It's this is what happened, right?
And it sucks.
And it was awful, But now I know that if you had took the right steps, forgiving that someone, and you've prayed about it and you gave it to the Lord, it's going to be okay. There'll be a day that, hey, it's not going to be as painful. So.
Yeah, I think two helpful things when it comes to processing that kind of thing. I mean, one, it's probably the ideal would be to talk with someone else, talk with another friend, and say, "Here's how I'm feeling through this."
Your pastor would be good too,
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and if you have someone who you trust and are willing, able to process that with you, again, there's asked the good question earlier is like, what's the line of gossip? You don't want
Mhm.
to go and process that in a way that's like trying to drag someone else through the mud, but sometimes it's helpful to verbalize stuff. Another way that I've found personally helpful in processing just emotions in general is journaling or just writing stuff out.
Oh,
There's something about taking something and putting it into words,
oh.
whether ideally with another person, or there's also impact and plenty of science behind the impact of writing out or speaking out something.
Even like for me, when I pray in the morning, um, there's times that I just have to start writing, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if I am praying in silence, my brain goes all over the
Mm-hmm.
place. But now, as I started like talking in my prayer, like talking out loud
Yeah.
and writing it, a friend was like, "Hey, you should start talking out loud as you pray." It's like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay." And I started
It
doing
helps you
that
focus.
and
Yeah.
just helps you really focus and writing down too. Sometimes you write down some stuff like, "Wow, I'm really feeling like this."
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And that kind of leads to that or fifth point, I should say,
Y-
the go to Jesus
Oh,
for comfort.
you have to understand that huh, we live in a broken world,
Yeah.
right? And we are sinful human beings too. And we're gonna do things to hurt each other. We're gonna do things to hurt um, others. So we constantly have to continue to keep repenting,
Yeah.
repent and believe. And then going to Jesus, it's like he's the friend.
Yeah.
He's the one that lets you in and that never lets you down, So
Yeah.
it's like go to him, cry out to him. Uh, Tell him to take this thing, take this pain that I'm feeling
Mm-hmm.
and be still. Like be still. He's with you and he has plans that you and I don't understand, but he will guide you through that pain.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It might, going to Jesus with that might look like talking to God in frustration of like, man, this person was a close friend and I thought we were good. And then all of a sudden this happens and now things are over. It might look like crying out to God and saying, I need some new friends, God, because that was my one close friend and now it's over.
yeah.
And yeah.
And sometimes he tells you that you're idolizing this relationship. You're idolizing
Mm-hmm.
these friendships and it's in the wrong shelf in the bookshelf. How did I say that even the right way? But in the bookshelf, make sure God is always on the top
Yeah.
and then everything
Yeah.
else is underneath that. So
Totally. And so the point with that, I think, is really about, man, don't, and I think I'm calling these numbers out wrong because that was actually number 4. Number 5 is invest in others more deeply. Because the tendency, right, when you get hurt by someone, is it's easy to default to kind of, oh, okay, I'm going to withdraw.
isolation.
And you can do
Yeah.
that towards God. You can do that towards other people. You can isolate, withdraw, and really, when a friendship ends, you need to do the opposite of that. Is say, how can I invest more deeply in the people that I still have, or even look for other people to care about and love more. Don't withdraw when you're hurt. You look at Jesus, right? How does he respond when he's rejected and by the people who are his people biblically? He moves forward and he lays down his life for them, and he says, I'm going to invite you in. And I think, we want to follow Jesus' example in that is when we're instead of shutting down when we're hurt, open up.
Yeah. And that goes for all relationships,
Yes,
not just
yes, for
friendships.
sure.
Whether you broke up with your girlfriend, whether um, a family member and you don't speak anymore, whatever that looks like invite people in and
Yeah.
do stuff. Like don't be isolated. I think there's also time for that. If you're isolated, be with the Father, be with the Son.
Yep.
Like be isolated with that. But don't um, do not be isolated with your own thoughts and with your own pain and invite people in.
Yeah, totally. Last point.
Every season in our life is so different,
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this friendship ending, the Lord is teaching you something. And maybe as soon as you learn that, that person comes back in your life and like, hey, I messed up. This one's on me.
Yeah.
And I loved what we had, but I want to continue our friendship again. And maybe that's a season that you guys become friends again, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're like, no, we're not doing this again. But um, again, like I said earlier, the plans that the Lord has, we really don't know, right?
Yeah.
But His plans is to prosper us, not to harm us, too. So there's seasons that your friends might come back, and there's seasons that you might not ever have that friend again. I don't know,
Mm.
but if they do come back, that's a lot.
Yeah. No, you don't need to assume that that an ending is permanent.
Yeah.
I think my wife and I had some fairly close friends who we had some conflict with, some disagreement with. Um, I don't think there was any necessarily lack of trust, or no one was particularly hurt by it. I mean, there was some hurt in the process just because we were like, oh, we thought we were on the same page, but we're actually not. Um, and that relationship ended for a time. They stepped back out of some of the roles that they were in. We stopped seeing them regularly, and didn't really interact much for probably a couple years. Um, and it wasn't because we disliked each other or anything. It was just like, oh man, there's this conflict, and we spent several months trying to resolve it, and it was just kind of like, okay, this is not something that's going to find a clear resolution where we're all like, oh yeah, now we agree about everything. Um, but in the last like year or two, we've gotten back together. We hang out occasionally. We have kids that are similar age. And we're friendly with each other. I wouldn't say they're less close friends than they were,
Mm-hmm.
but we still really enjoy them as a couple, enjoy their family, and I would call us still friends. So just a good example, I think, of a scenario there where there was conflict, disagreement, and a friendship ended, and in some ways it's been kind of resurrected in a new way. Not quite the same intensity or quality as it was, and I don't mean quality in like it's not like it's a worse friendship than it was,
Yeah.
but it's just not the same type of dynamic that we had previously. But we'd still definitely call them friends. So just because something ended doesn't mean it's over.
Yeah. Sometimes that door is still open.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this was a great podcast. Great episode. Great episode.
Yeah,
So,
here would be my final encouragement for you if you're going through the end of a friendship. It's just keep going, man. Go to Jesus, go to the people around you, and be willing to see what God has next.
it's going to be okay. Sometimes that's hard to believe that, but it's going to be okay, and you'll get through it. And yeah, the Lord is going to guide you, like you said, Ben. Go to Jesus. Go to Him. So everything's going to be okay. Thanks for listening, friend. We love you. We'll see you next week.